Hello, everyone. This is James Song here. Nice to see you. Thank you for watching my video. We have another edition of listening lesson of the TOEFL test, and we're covering a lecture passage. So obviously, it's a little longer and harder than the conversation part. So we'll play the listening passage first, write notes on them, and then we'll go through the questions in this section one by one. So it would be a great idea if you join me writing notes with me, and then you can compare your notes to mine while going through the solving questions. So without further ado, let's listen to the passage and do some note taking. Here we go.
Listen to part of a lecture in a linguistics class.
Okay, the conventions or assumptions that govern conversation. These may vary from one culture to another, but basically, for people to communicate, they have to follow certain rules. Like, if I'm talking with you and I start saying things that are not true, if you can't tell when I'm lying and when I'm telling the truth, well, we're not going to have a very satisfactory conversation, are we? Why? Because it violates one of the Gricean maxims. That's a set of rules, or maxims, a philosopher named H.P. Grice came up with in the 1970s. One of these Gricean maxims is, well, I've already given you a hint.
Oh, you just can't go around telling lies.
Right, or as Grice put it, do not say what you believe to be false. That's one of Grice's maxims of quality, as he called it. So that's pretty obvious. But there are others just as important, like, suppose you were to ask me what time it was, and I replied, my sister just got married. What would you think?
You're not really answering my question.
No, I'm not, am I? There's no connection at all, which feels wrong because you generally expect to find one. So one important maxim is simply be relevant. And using this so-called maxim of relevance, we can infer things as well. Or rather, the speaker can imply things and the listener can make inferences. For instance, suppose you say you'd really love to have a cup of coffee right now, and I say, there's a shop around the corner. Now, what can you infer from what I said?
Well, that the shop sells coffee, for one thing.
Right, and that I believe it's open now. Because if I weren't implying those things, my response would not be relevant. It'd have no connection with what you said before. But, according to the maxim, my response should be relevant to your statement, meaning we should assume some connection between the statement and the response. And this maxim of relevance is quite efficient to use. Even if I don't spell out all the details, you can still make some useful logical inferences, namely, the shop is open and it sells coffee. If we actually had to explain all these details, conversations would move along pretty slowly, wouldn't they? Okay, then there's the maxims of manner, including things like be clear and avoid ambiguity. And another, more interesting maxim is one of the so-called maxims of quantity of information, that is. It says to give as much information as is required in the situation. So, suppose you ask me what I did yesterday, and I say, I went to the art museum. You would likely infer that I saw some works of art. Suppose, though, that I did not go inside the museum. I just walked up to it, then left. Then I violated the quantity maxim by not giving enough information. So you can see how important implications are to our ability to carry on a conversation. But there are times when people will violate these maxims on purpose. Let's say a boss is asked to write a letter of recommendation for a former employee seeking an engineering job. The letter he writes is quite brief, something like, Mr. X is polite and always dresses neatly. So what does this really mean?
Oh, I see. By not mentioning any important qualities related to the job, the boss is, like, implying that this is the best that can be said about Mr. X, that he's really not qualified.
Exactly. It's a written letter, not a conversation, but the principle's the same. The boss is conveying a negative impression of Mr. X without actually saying anything negative about him. So, by violating the maxims, it can be a way to be subtle or polite, or to convey humor through sarcasm or irony. Sometimes, though, people will violate maxims for another purpose, to deceive. Now, can you imagine who might do such a thing?
Some politicians?
Or advertisers.
Right. Anyone who may see an advantage in implying certain things that are untrue without explicitly saying something untrue. They think, hey, don't blame us if our audience happens to draw inferences that are simply not true. So, next time you see an advertisement saying some product could be up to 20% more effective, think of these maxims of quantity and relevance and ask yourself what inferences you're being led to draw. Think, more effective than what exactly? And why did they use those little phrases, could be and up to? These claims give us a lot less information than they seem to.
All right. So how did you go? Yeah, sorry about the writing not being very neat, my note. I will try to do a better job next time. Yeah, I mean, my notes aren't usually this bad, but I don't know what happened this time. I was maybe just busy writing it down or something. It's not very neat, but nevertheless, quality of the notes, I'm sure you'll be happy with as I go through these notes with you, for you, okay? So when you having a conversation, right? There are rules. I mean, you don't really need to write this down. If you can remember, when conversations are being carried out, or what governs conversation is there are a set of rules, okay? So this could be your first word for your notes, that's fine, okay? So when you're having conversation, there are certain rules, you know, we have to obey to have a conversation. So you cannot just lie, right? If you saying things that are untrue, then you're not going to have a very good conversation or effective conversation, because it violates Gricean maxim. You don't have to spell it out, okay? Some kind of maxim, Greek maxim, and when you see the question, you just need to remember the sound of the terminology so that when the question is spelled out for you, then you just need to be able to recognize. That's all it is, okay? I mean, who cares what Gricean maxim is, okay? It's just the contents that we need to understand to answer the questions correctly, right? Okay, so if you say untruthful things, you are violating Gricean maxims. Okay, so Gricean maxims are a set of rules, you know, that you need to keep to have a good conversation. And it's the name of the person, developed in 1970s. Okay, so let's go. So first, Gricean maxims. Number one, you can like purposely lie or, you know, saying untruthful things on purpose, okay? And we call this quality, right? It's just the name of maxim, okay? Moving on. Second maxim. So they give you a example, right? And if you think you can remember, and if you don't think it's like important concept, then you don't have to write it down, okay? You know, basically there was an example like somebody asked you what time it is, then you are saying something completely irrelevant, like, you know, I want to play football. I mean, obviously that was not the example that was mentioned in the listening passage, but the point is, if you understand, then it's fine, right? So example was somebody was not answering the question, okay? So if you don't answer the question, that means there's no connection in conversation, right? So the second maxim is you have to be relevant, okay? First maxim is you should try to say truthful things on purpose, right? And you need to be relevant. That's the second rule, okay, of Gricean maxim. And speakers can imply things and listener can infer things. What does that mean? So if somebody said, I would love some coffee right now, then you can respond and have a conversation by saying, there's a shop around the corner. Then, the speaker is implying that the shop sells the coffee and it is open right now to the other person who said, I would love a cup of coffee now. To almost answer the question, you can go to this shop around the corner because you will get the coffee because they sell it and it is open. So you'll get some coffee that you would like to get right now. So that's a conversation, right? So speakers can imply by saying there's a shop around the corner. What this means is if there is no implication, there's no inference, right? There's a shop around the corner, right? If you just understand word for word, what does that mean? This person who said, I would love a cup of coffee right now, would respond without inference, would say, what kind of shop? Is that a coffee shop? Is that a stationery shop? Is that a clothing shop? Is that a restaurant? The conversation will go off topic like this, okay? So that's what the speaker is saying. Speaker is saying, by saying there's a shop around the corner, the speaker is already implying that they sell coffee and it is open so you can go to not a shop, the shop around the corner that I'm implying to get some coffee, right? And listener need to make the right inferences. Listener need to get it, right? When the speaker said, there's a shop around the corner, then listener need to understand, okay, he's saying there's a coffee shop around the corner. Okay? So that's amplification, implying by speaker, and listener also need to make right inferences in conversation, as long as you're relevant, because you need to be relevant to follow the Gricean's maxim, okay? And there was some detail about, you don't need to say everything if you're able to infer, okay? And there was a detail about if everything needed to be explained, then conversation would be very slow, meaning, they'll take too much time. Okay, so you need to be relevant. And if you are relevant, actually you can make right amplification and inferences, right? To have a good conversation. All right, third rule. Manner is a third rule. So you need to be clear and not ambiguous. Ambiguous means like fuzzy, like not clear. Ambiguous means you cannot really understand exactly, okay? It's unclear. So you need to be clear. And number 4 was called quantity, and that is a quantity of information. So you need to have a good quantity of information to have a good conversation according to Gricean's maxim. So you need good amount of information, quantity, as much as it's required in different situations. So based on context, you need to give enough information so that listeners can understand or make right inferences. Okay, right inferences. What does that mean? Okay, so for example, if I said I went to an art museum on the weekend to my friend, the friend may feel that I went inside to the museum and saw some art, right? But if I didn't go inside the art museum, I just walk up to the art museum and left. But if I don't give that information, I just say, I went to art museum on the weekend, finish, then I'm not giving enough amount of information. So my quantity of information is really lacking and misleading him or leading him to make wrong inferences. So that's violating quantity of information. Okay, if I said I went to an art museum on the weekend, because that could mean I went inside and saw some art, but I didn't. So I have to tell my friend that, but I didn't go inside the museum. I have to say that to help him understand clearly, right? So, however, it's interesting that in some situation, this quantity maxim can be violated, not kept on purpose. In what situation? For example, if the boss is writing a recommendation letter, it could be very brief and say, the person is very polite and dressed well, but does not mention anything about the job function or job or how well he works, like whether he has a communication skills or he works hard or his competencies, right? If the recommendation letter does not have any information about the job, but just, the employee is polite and dresses well, then by violating the quantity maximum purpose, okay, the speaker or writer is implying, okay, to the listener or reader that this employee is not really good at his job. He's not really qualified because it's a recommendation letter, but there's no information. Okay, right? So the writer may write this way on purpose to say this employee is not qualified. Okay, so in letter, in writing, in speaking, it's the same. Okay, so we're talking about when you have a conversation. So just a little detail, say writing is the same. Okay, as long as you're communicating. Okay, so it backs up. Okay, what's the result? What's the outcome by violating the quantity maxim? The who writes the letter is negative about this employee, so it's not really recommending this employee without saying it directly or explicitly. Explicitly, as you know, of course, it means like directly upfront. Okay. Yeah. So quantity can be violated to be polite, or to show sense of humor and a couple other things it mentioned in the listening. Moving on, not important. And next paragraph, right? But perhaps more importantly, right? Quantity maxim is violated on purpose when you want to deceive, when you want to trick someone over, all right? Purposely make someone to not make a false, fail to understand what you're trying to say, okay? Or trick them, okay? False them, right? To deceive, right? Okay. So politician, okay, or advertisement, all right? Okay, so questions being asked by a student in the lecture. And the professor tells them that advertisement or advertiser, so speaker or writer in this case, can purposely imply something that is false to trick the audiences, trick the consumer, without saying untruthful things directly. Okay? So what's the example? The advertiser, by violating quantity maxim, the advertiser could say a phrase like, something could be 20% more effective. So what does this mean? Could be is not 100%. So, when you say could be is a positive connotation, so advertiser is wanting the reader or listener of this advertisement to feel that it is 20% more effective. But advertiser can say, I only said could be. Could be, could not be. Maybe, 50-50. Okay, could be is not definite. So it's purposely misleading the consumers by giving less information, right? Okay, could be, right? So the professor is saying why advertisers would use such phrase like could be or up to trick the customers. And advertisers can still back themselves by saying, I didn't lie. I said could be. Could be means could not be as well. Okay. Or up to maximum, but it may not be up to that level. Minimum, I didn't say. So professor in this lecture is trying to tell the student, how advertisers purposely violate the quantity maxim to deceive consumers by using could be or up to, okay? And professor clearly say advertisers are using less information than they seem to, okay? It may seem enough information, but it's not. It's trying to trick the consumers. Okay, so pretty much word for word, right? I think our understanding of this listening passage is perfect. No less than working with the actual script. I explained everything. So let's move on and solve the questions and get every question right. All right, let's look at the questions. Okay, now we understood the passage perfectly. Let's also get all the questions right. All right, so there are 6 questions starting from question number 6. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And it starts from question 6 because this is a second passage of the whole one set of TOEFL listening part of the TOEFL test. Okay, so let's start with question 6. What is the main topic of the lecture? So main topic is it's the overview of the Gricean's maxim because it covers first maxim, second maxim, third maxim, and fourth maxim. Although, they spend more time in second maxim and fourth maxim, the main topic is definitely describing 4 of Gricean's maxim, right? Okay. So A, the reasons people are not always truthful in conversation. So that's only last paragraph if this was the reading passage, right? So it's not the whole main topic of the lecture. So it's not answering the question. It's only fourth part. It's only one part. Okay, B, the need for greater regulation of language used in advertising. Also, only one part. and this is actually wrong information. Okay, this, you could argue this is implied, right? But this is the language test, and this is over inference if you think B is right. So it's wrong in two different ways. First, it's not the main topic of the whole passage, and also there was never actually information about need for greater regulation explicitly stated in the passage. So this kind of answer choice will always be wrong because it will be over inference. Okay. Answer choice C, the need for maximum precision and detail in everyday conversation. Yeah, I mean, very kind of vague, tricky answer choice. C kind of seems right, but it's not talking about the need. That's not the whole like main idea of the passage. Main idea is there is need. So these are some rules, right? Rule number 1, rule number 2, rule number 3, rule number 4. That's the main topic, okay? So C does not answer the question, right? It does not answer this question. So main topic, the role of certain rules, yeah. So rule number 1, the function, number 2, number 3, number 4. Okay, so certain rules here refers to Gricean's maxim, 1, 2, 3, 4, in determining what a speaker means. Exactly, right? It talks about when you have a conversation, how does it make effective conversation? By following these rules when you are communicating with someone. And the focus is the speaker or writer to do the right things, okay? Don't say untruthful things. Speak relevant way, be clear, and give enough information, okay? So question 6, D. All right, let's move on to question 7. Question 7, according to the professor, what helps speakers keep conversation from proceeding too slowly? So this was kind of a detail, but not minor detail. So I have written it down in my notes, but some of you may not have written it down, but remember, or this is type of question that you learn, although it's a detail, it's not a minor detail, so you need to kind of understand it and remember, or actually write it down, okay? So here, second maxim, you need to be relevant, and speakers need to imply, can imply, and listeners, because speaker is relevant to the topic, listeners need to be able to make right inferences, right? So I would love a cup of coffee right now, and the person could say, there's a shop around the corner. So conversation is done, okay? This person would go to this shop and get some coffee. But here in the note, right? The lecturer in the listening passage said, if everything need to be explained, then conversation could become very slow, meaning, conversation would become too long, right? So this is the right note-taking area for question 7, okay? So let's pick the right answer. What helps speakers keep conversation from proceeding too slowly? The speakers need to make a good amplification, right? The ability to make inferences according to, yeah, okay. So you need to make inferences, right? Correctly though. So A looks really good. B, the ability to effectively distinguish truth from falsehood. It has nothing to do with true and false. is not answering the question. Okay. The answer should be making and giving right inferences. Okay. C, the willingness to acknowledge that a Gricean maxim has been violated. So you have to be willing, open enough to accept that Gricean maxim has been violated. What? Yeah, can't even I cannot even comprehend this sentence correctly to answer this question. It's totally irrelevant. Okay, it's actually violating Gricean's maxim, although it's not a conversation. C is not relevant to the question at all. D, the willingness to ignore Gricean maxim. Okay, so sometimes let's just ignore it. Forget it. Don't worry about Gricean maxim. Just don't be relevant. Be irrelevant sometimes. Let's do that. Terrible answer. Right? So question 7, the right answer is A. All right, moving on to question 8. Looks pretty heavy. It's a whole table. So let's look at question 8. For each of the following, indicate whether or not it reflects one of Gricean's maxims. See, when you see this, so my note-taking was like this, right? Okay, GM, right? And you just need to be able to match the terminology, exact spelling the question gives you, then you're doing your job, right? It reflects, so whether or not it reflects one of Gricean maxims, professor mentioned. So something is a maxim, something is not, like irrelevant or wrong. And some answer choices are actually one of the Gricean's maxim. Let's go. Try to make the topic interesting. Has the listening talked about one of the rules is to make topic more interesting? Actually not, right? Not directly, at least. Like, try to make topic interesting is not one of the maxim. Avoid making claims that are false. That's the first one, right? Right? Make sure you don't say untruthful things on purpose. You try to say things that are true. At least you try, okay? So you avoid making claims that are false. So that's maxim, the first one. Quality. Make comment as informative as necessary. Yeah, that's the quantity of info. So this one here. As much information as required in situation. So based in context, you need to give as much information, not too much information, but necessary amount of information for listeners to understand correctly. Okay. So that's rule number 4. Quantity. Quan. All right. Make as few assumptions as possible. There's no such rule. Okay. Assumption is a little bit different to inferences, but even you consider assumption as like kind of or part of inferences. There's no maxim of make as less inference or implication as possible. It's simply not a part of maxim. Okay, if anything, you need to write, you need to make right kind and right amount of inferences. Okay, assumptions according to rule number 2. Okay, so Last one, make comments relate to previous statement. Yeah, you need to answer the question in conversation. So you need to be relevant. So that's rule number 2. Okay, so it's here. If somebody asks time, you have to answer what time it is. Okay, don't say something completely irrelevant or not connected. Okay, so I think we did perfect job for question number 8. So question number 8, first one is not a maxim, second is maxim, third is maxim, fourth one is not a maxim, and final and fifth one is a maxim. Okay, so these are the answers for question 8. All right, moving on to question 9. Why does the professor, why? What's the reason? Does the professor describe a letter of recommendation? Okay, so without looking at the answer choice, it's a rhetorical purpose question. So if you understood the question and the contents, you should be able to kind of answer it without looking at the answer choices. So let's try to answer this. The reason why professor described letter of recommendation is what? Because it's an example of when quantity maxim is violated on purpose. Okay, see, notes here, right? When quantity maxim is violated on purpose for good reasons, I guess. The boss doesn't want to say negative things about this person. So, the boss imply negative things about this person without actually explicitly or directly saying negative things, right? So these 3 parts of the note will help you. Okay, answer choices. A, to point out differences between written statement and spoken statement. This is wrong. And also actually the listening says, although it's letter, it's the same, whether it's a written or spoken situation. Okay. See here, right? So A is wrong. B, to illustrate how people may be deceived in a business environment. I wouldn't say deceived. That's more advert, the last one, right? So the purpose is not to deceive, but be not explicit, right? Or be polite, right? Okay. So deceive is here, and deceive is related to the advertisers, not this person who wrote a recommendation letter. Okay, it's violated the quantity maxim on purpose to maybe be polite or discreet. Okay, so I think B is a bit too much. To show how violating maxim may contribute to a statement's meaning. Yeah. Okay, so what was the statement? He's very polite and dresses well. So what does that mean? So statement is the employee is polite and dresses well. But what does it mean? Because this statement does not include enough information about the job or his ability to do the job. Okay. Although he didn't say he's not qualified, by only saying, what is the statement? He's a polite and dresses well, and that's it. No more information. Violating maxim can imply different meaning of this statement. Okay, the statement of he's very polite and dresses well means he's not qualified for the job. He you know, he's not good enough in doing his job, right? Yeah, so very good question, okay? D, to prove that lying is sometimes considered acceptable. White lies, okay? He is polite and dresses well. Is that a lie? Is that a white lie? No. All right, so question 9, the answer is C. Okay, let's keep on moving. Second last question for this section of the listening test. Question 10 and question 11, and we're done. So question 10, what does the professor imply about advertisers? They are beep, beep. They are beep. Okay, sorry. Advertisers purposely trick people, purposely not give enough information, and try to trick consumers to make false decision, maybe. Okay. All right, let's find out the answer by reading the answer choices. They are less likely than politicians. There's no direct comparison of advertisers and politicians in this passage. Who are worse or okay? Yeah, it's not mentioned this way. There was no direct comparison. Who is worse or who did what? Okay, it was just a group. Maybe politicians and advertisers do these things, and professors in the listening focuses on advertisers only. So A is wrong. B. They realize that consumers know whether an advertiser violates a maxim. This is a thing. This is the whole thing, right? Advertiser, they're trying at least, they're violating a maxim, but trying very hard for consumer to not know about their intention, right? To trick them, okay? So B is opposite, okay? B is saying advertisers realize that consumers know what they're doing, what advertisers are doing, or how or whether advertisement violate a maxim. That's opposite, okay? Advertisers realize that consumer may not know whether advertisement violate a maxim. That's the right answer, okay? So this is opposite. C, they often make use of Gricean maxims to express humor. That's different section, yeah? Okay, so before moving on to deceiving purpose, they may use it for sense of humor or be polite or whatever. So this is different section. It's before we talk about the advertisers, right? So it's not answering the questions. D, they realize that advertisers, consumers make false influences. Yeah, exactly, right? All right, advertisers realize that consumers may make false, wrong inferences from their advertisement, which violates the Gricean's maxim by saying could be or up to, or they are trying at least. That's what they are trying to achieve, right? So D is the right answer. Clear? So the answer is D. Question 10, D. Okay, here we go.
What type of maxim does the professor illustrate with this example?
For instance, suppose you say you'd really love to have a cup of coffee right now, and I say, there's a shop around the corner.
Okay, so we've done this many times. So this example from the notes is in the section of be relevant, maxim, second maxim, Gricean maxim, so be relevant. And also, I mean, you should have spotted from your note-taking, you know, look back in your notes and it's right here. I would love a cup of coffee right now. But, you know, even you couldn't automatically go back to your notes and remember your notes. If you just listen, I would love a cup of coffee. Then the answer was there's a shop around the corner, right? So that's, you need to answer the question. So it's a matter of being relevant and giving relevant answer to the questions being asked. So question 11, D. That's it, guys. So another section done. TOEFL listening, lecture, passage. So I'll see you again in the next video. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Bye for now and see you soon.